Think again. These Wild West watering holes served up some of the strangest, richest, and most surprising meals on the frontier. From deep-fried bull testicles to sourdough pancakes carried in saddlebags, these aren't campfire myths. They're real dishes served to real gunslingers across the American West. Let's dig into 25 cowboy recipes you never knew were actually on the menu at Wild West Saloons. 1. Son of a gun stew. It sounded like a joke until you saw what was actually in it. Son of a gun stew was the ultimate don't ask, just eat dish on the American frontier. And yes, it was genuinely served in saloons across cattle towns, from Dodge City to Abilene. Its origins trace back to trail drives, where cowboys butchered cattle on the move and used every part of the animal, not just out of respect, but out of necessity. Waste was weakness. This stew combined organ meats like tripe, heart, liver, marrow gut, sweetbreads, and even the brain, all simmered in a thick, peppery broth with potatoes, onions, and sometimes carrots or wild herbs. In some regions, it was a rite of passage. A cowboy's toughness wasn't measured by his draw, but by whether he could finish a full bowl. What made it a saloon staple? Simple. It was hearty, high-calorie, and cheap. Cattle towns at the edge of civilization didn't have access to prime cuts, but they had guts, fire, and cast iron. And for trail-weary cowboys, a hot bowl of son-of-a-gun stew meant survival, even if it came with a side of mystery meat. 2. Sourdough flapjacks. Before protein bars and diner breakfasts, cowboys had flapjacks, big, flat, pan-fried pancakes made from wild-cultured sourdough starter that some carried in tins tied to their saddlebags. They weren't just a meal, they were a frontier tradition, and cooks guarded their starters like gold. The batter was mixed with water, flour, and salt, no sugar, and fried in bacon grease until crispy at the edges and soft inside. The sour tang came from weeks or even months of fermentation. These flapjacks were dense, chewy, and filling, often served by saloons with molasses, pork drippings, or canned fruit if the owner had access to a rail line. In saloons, flapjacks were served morning, noon, or midnight, depending on who stumbled in and how long they'd been riding. Some called them sinkers because they hit your stomach like a rock, but they stuck with you, which was exactly the point. These weren't dainty breakfast cakes. These were survival carbs, fried in cast iron and meant to carry you through a gunfight or a 10-mile ride in the cold. And the best part? The last one on the plate always got the extra spoonful of syrup, if there was any left. 3. Fried salt pork and beans. No dish says Wild West like a plate of beans. But fried salt pork and beans was more than a cliche. It was the foundation of frontier life, served in nearly every saloon west of the Mississippi. Salt pork, a fatty preserved cut cured in heavy salt brine, was shelf-stable and could survive harsh months in barrels without refrigeration. Saloons would slice it thick, fry it in its own fat until browned and crisp, then spoon it over simmered beans, usually pinto or navy beans that had been boiled for hours over a low fire. Molasses, onions, and lard were common add-ins, but if supplies were short, you just had pork grease and beans. And you better believe it was delicious. Add a hunk of day-old sourdough or cornbread, and you had a meal that could keep a cowboy riding from dawn to dusk. Beans were served by the bowl, the plate, or the pan, often straight from the cook's fire to the bar. Some saloons even had them on offer 24/7, because no one who worked cattle wanted to drink on an empty stomach. 4. Chuck wagon coffee. Some called it six-shooter brew. Others called it liquid tar. But every cowboy knew that chuck wagon coffee wasn't just a drink. It was the lifeblood of the trail. Brewed strong enough to float a horseshoe, coffee was often made in battered tin pots using coarse grounds thrown directly into boiling water. To settle the grounds, trail cooks added eggshells, crushed beans, or In some cases, a pinch of salt or even a piece of rawhide. Saloons often kept a black pot on the stove all day long, topped off every few hours but rarely cleaned. You could walk in, drop a coin or nugget of gold dust on the bar, and get a steaming tin cup of jet black coffee that doubled as a conversation starter and hangover cure. Cowboys drank it before breakfast, after poker, and sometimes instead of sleep. And if you were lucky, the barkeep might offer a splash of whiskey to fix the flavor. 5. Prairie oysters, Rocky Mountain oysters. No list of saloon cuisine would be complete without the most infamous delicacy of the Old West, prairie oysters, also known today as Rocky Mountain oysters. Despite the name, they're not seafood. They're deep-fried bull testicles served hot and crispy after cattle roundups and brandings. Cowboys didn't waste meat. Tomatoes and chili powder blends became household staples. Cowboys made chili the frontier way, with pinto beans, dried chilies, chunks of beef, and little else. In fact, many early saloon versions didn't use tomatoes at all, especially in Texas, where red chili stews were built around dried ancho or pasilla peppers ground by hand. The meat was seared in tallow, the beans were soaked overnight, and the entire pot was left to simmer for hours. Some saloon cooks threw in wild garlic, onions, or coffee for extra depth. Others kept it minimalist: beef, beans, heat. This kind of chili was more than a meal. It was medicine, myth, and marketing. Some saloons advertised it as the bowl of red that bites back. Served with a hunk of sourdough or just eaten with a spoon, it warmed the bones and fed the fight. And if you asked for it mild, the barkeep would laugh and slide the pot closer. 22. Bread pudding with whiskey sauce. Not every cowboy had a sweet tooth, but those who did often found comfort in bread pudding, a clever dessert made from old biscuits, stale bread, or leftover cornbread soaked in milk, sugar, and eggs. It was the original waste-not dessert, baked until golden and spooned out in soft, spiced portions. Some saloon cooks added raisins or dried apples. Others topped it with a warm sauce, usually whiskey mixed with sugar and butter, poured right over the top before serving. Bread pudding wasn't always on the menu, but when it showed up, it meant someone in the kitchen cared. It was slow food, a dish that took thought and timing, often served to travelers who'd been riding for days and just needed something that felt like kindness. 23. Fried trout with cornmeal crust. In mountain towns and settlements near rivers and streams, saloons often served fresh-caught trout, dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried in pork fat until golden and crisp. Unlike beef or buffalo, fish didn't need long cooking, and when the stagecoach brought in guests from back east, trout was considered a more refined offering. The fish was served whole, head-on, bones intact, sometimes with pickled onions or boiled potatoes on the side. But the key was the crust, salty, crackly, and made from coarse ground cornmeal and black pepper. Fried trout offered cowboys a rare taste of delicacy, especially when the trout was caught that morning. And for those who spent weeks eating jerky or beans, it felt like high-class dining, even if it came on a tin plate. 24. Gooseberry wild in the foothills and plains, and for many saloon cooks, they were the secret to a truly Western cobbler, tart, tangy, and perfect for pairing with sweet biscuit topping. The berries were cooked down with sugar into a jammy filling, poured into cast iron pans, and topped with dollops of thick dough. Some saloons served it with fresh cream, others with just a sprinkle of sugar on top. The flavor was bold, sour, and sweet at once, and it was a favorite among old-timers and cowboys who'd grown up foraging. Gooseberry cobbler was a taste of the untamed land itself, baked into something tender and warm. 25. Scrapple. Borrowed from the Mid-Atlantic and Pennsylvania Dutch communities but found in Wild West saloons by the late 1800s, scrapple was a clever, thrifty breakfast food made by mixing pork scraps, liver, cornmeal, and spices into a thick loaf, then slicing and frying it. It was cheap, hearty, and easy to prepare in bulk, which made it perfect for early morning saloon service, especially in colder months. The crispy crust and soft interior made it satisfying on its own, but many cowboys topped it with molasses, mustard, or eggs. Scrapple may have sounded strange, but it filled bellies and kept men riding. And in a world where nothing was wasted, it was a celebration of resourcefulness wrapped in a crackling crust. So, were these 25 recipes really served at Wild West saloons? Yes, every last one of them. Because saloons weren't just whiskey joints. They were the first diners, the original truck stops, the only place a cowboy could get a hot meal between dust storms, gunfights, and the long road west. Some of these dishes were strange, some were simple, and some you probably wish you'd tried sooner. Incredibly tender when cooked slowly. Buffalo was often sliced thin and served with gravy or a side of potatoes. And if you were in a mining boom town, buffalo could cost more than beef, not because it was rare, but because demand was so high. Buffalo roast was a status meal. Only the best saloons had it, and cowboys who could afford it often ordered it to celebrate a big win or a big bounty. Ironically, the popularity of this dish helped drive the buffalo to near extinction by the late 1800s. But for a time, buffalo roast was the centerpiece of the frontier feast. 12. Biscuits and molasses. Simple, sticky, satisfying. For cowboys too tired to eat meat and too poor for eggs, biscuits and molasses were a godsend. Biscuits were made from flour, lard, salt, and water or sour milk. No yeast, no sugar. Baked quickly in a Dutch oven or skillet, they came out crispy on the outside and flaky inside. Saloon kitchens kept them ready through the day. Molasses, thick.
Hit that subscribe button, enable notifications, and join our growing community of resourceful cooks, memory keepers, and old souls